James Carter had never been one to believe in fate. A former soldier turned diplomat, he preferred logic and strategy over the abstract whims of the universe. Yet, as his exploration ship careened through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, trailing flames like a meteor from old Earth mythology, he couldn't help but feel that some unseen force had conspired against him. His instruments were failing, and the escape pod had barely managed to eject before the ship's final descent into a fiery explosion. The pod crashed into a dense jungle, the impact jarring James into a painful awareness of his predicament. Thick, alien foliage surrounded him, casting strange shadows in the dim light of the planet's twin suns. He staggered out, clutching his emergency gear and his trusty collapsible multitool, a marvel of engineering capable of transforming into nearly any tool he might need, at least for repairs, not survival. His first priority was to establish communication. The pod's beacon was damaged, but he managed to rig a makeshift transmitter from spare parts. Before he could test it, however, a deep, guttural sound echoed through the jungle. It was not the cry of a beast but the rhythmic cadence of drums, steady, deliberate, and unmistakably purposeful. James turned toward the sound, his soldier's instincts kicking in. He barely had time to retrieve his multi-tool, which he extended into a staff for defense, before the source of the noise emerged. From the underbrush, they came, towering, humanoid figures clad in iridescent armor that shimmered like liquid silver. Their faces were partially obscured by intricate helmets adorned with organic motifs, horns, vines, and feathers that seemed to grow naturally from the metal itself. Their eyes, glowing a vivid violet, locked onto James with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. At their head was a figure who stood taller than the rest, her presence commanding and her armor more ornate. She carried a spear that crackled with energy, and her posture exuded both authority and menace. James could tell immediately that she was their leader. "Human," she said, her voice a resonant melody that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. Her speech was in an alien tongue, but his translator device, thankfully still functional, converted her words into something he could understand. "You bear the long staff. You are the one foretold in our prophecies." James glanced down at his multi-tool staff, confusion flashing across his face. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he began, his tone cautious. "There is no misunderstanding," she interrupted, stepping closer. "The staff is the symbol of the fertility bearer, the one who will save our people from extinction. You will fulfill your role, or you will perish." James' grip tightened on his multi-tool, not in preparation for a fight but as a way to steady himself. He had faced death before, but never in circumstances so bizarre. "I'm not sure what you think I can do, but I'm not your fertility bearer. I'm just an explorer who crash-landed here." The leader tilted her head, a gesture that might have been curiosity or contempt. "You claim ignorance, yet you wield the sacred artifact. The long staff has chosen you." James decided to change tactics. "My name is James Carter. I'm here by accident. Let's start over. Who are you?" "I am Vielira, matriarch of this Kareth," she declared, her voice swelling with pride. "Our people were once many, but we have been cursed with dwindling numbers. The long staff is the key to our salvation. You will use it to grant us the future we deserve." The crowd behind her murmured in agreement, their voices a low, harmonious hum. James' mind raced. He didn't understand their culture or their desperation, but he knew one thing: he needed to find a way to de-escalate this situation. "Listen, Vielira," he said, adopting his most diplomatic tone. "I'm willing to help you, but I need to understand what's going on. What exactly do you think this staff can do?" Vielira's expression softened, if only slightly. "The long staff is a relic of the ancients said to possess the power to restore fertility to our people. Its wielder must undergo the rite of renewal, a sacred ceremony that will bind your essence to ours." James winced at the phrase. Bind your essence. He had encountered plenty of alien customs during his diplomatic career, but this sounded uncomfortably intimate. "And what happens if I refuse?" Vielira's face hardened. "Then you will face the judgment of the void. Your refusal would condemn not only yourself but also the hope of our people. As if on cue, the tribe's warriors raised their weapons, energy crackling along their edges. The message was clear: compliance or death. James took a deep breath, his mind working furiously to find a way out of this predicament. He couldn't fight them all, not directly. But he wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist. He needed time to learn more about their culture, their weaknesses, and their desperation. "I need to think about this," he said finally, stalling for time. Vieira nodded, though her eyes remained sharp. "You have until the twin sunset. After that, your decision will be made for you." The tribe escorted him to a makeshift camp, where they provided him with food and water, alien in appearance but surprisingly palatable. As he ate, James observed his captors closely. Despite their imposing size and advanced technology, there was an undercurrent of vulnerability in their movements. They weren't just a warlike tribe, they were a people on the brink of collapse, clinging to a sliver of hope. James knew he couldn't rely on brute force to escape this situation. He would need to use his wits, his charm, and perhaps even his multi-tool. But one thing was certain: he wasn't going to let himself become a pawn in their desperate game. As the twin suns dipped lower on the horizon, casting the jungle in hues of amber and violet, James stared at the staff in his hands. To this Kareth, it was a symbol of salvation. To him, it was a tool, a means to an end. He would find a way to turn their belief to his advantage. After all, James Carter didn't believe in fate. He believed in survival. And he wasn't about to let an alien prophecy decide his. James Carter's mind churned with potential escape plans as the twin suns dipped lower in the alien sky. The Kareth tribe had given him a choice: comply with their demand to participate in the rite of renewal, or face death. Yet, when the moment of decision arrived, James found himself swept into a third option entirely: the trial of proving. Vieira stood before her gathered tribe, her imposing figure illuminated by the flickering light of ceremonial fires. Her voice carried over the assembly like thunder. "This human doubts the destiny foretold by our ancestors. He refuses the rite of renewal. Therefore, he must prove his worth to wield the long staff in the trial of proving." The announcement drew a collective murmur from the crowd. James could feel their violet eyes boring into him, a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He had no idea what this trial entailed, but the alternative was a swift execution. Better to play along and buy more time to formulate a plan. "I accept," James said, projecting a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Vieira gestured, and two warriors approached, confiscating his gear. James tried to object, but Vieira silenced him with a sharp look. "The trial must be faced with nothing but your strength, mind, and spirit." The first challenge began almost immediately. James was led into a massive arena carved from the jungle itself. Alien glyphs and symbols lined the perimeter, glowing faintly in the dark. At the center stood a hulking beast, an 8-legged creature with a carapace of iridescent scales and mandibles that clicked ominously. The crowd roared as the beast's handler released it, and it charged toward James with terrifying speed. James dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's snapping jaws. Years of military training kicked in as he assessed the situation. The beast was fast and heavily armored, but its underbelly appeared softer, less protected. He needed to exploit that weakness. Darting around the arena, James grabbed a fallen branch from the jungle floor. It wasn't much, but it was sturdy enough to use as a makeshift spear. As the beast charged again, James feinted to one side, then rolled under its belly, driving the branch upward with all his strength. The improvised weapon struck true, piercing the soft flesh. The creature let out an ear-piercing screech before collapsing, its legs twitching in defeat. The crowd erupted into cheers and astonished gasps. James stood, chest heaving, as Vieira observed him with a glint of approval in her eyes. "Impressive," she said. "But brute strength alone is not enough. The next challenge awaits." The second trial took place in a cavern illuminated by bioluminescent moss. At the center of the cavern was a towering monolith covered in alien glyphs. A faint hum emanated from the structure, resonating in James' chest. Vieira explained the challenge: Solve the ancient puzzle inscribed on the monolith to unlock the path forward. James approached the monolith cautiously, examining the glyphs. They seemed to shift and rearrange themselves as he touched the surface. At first, the patterns made no sense, but as he studied them, he noticed a recurring motif, symbols that resembled constellations. Drawing on his knowledge of astronomy, James began to piece together the puzzle. The glyphs corresponded to star charts, each representing a different alignment of celestial bodies. He rearranged the symbols until they formed a coherent sequence, and the monolith emitted a low chime. The cavern rumbled as a hidden door slid open, revealing a passageway. The crowd, now gathered at the cavern's entrance, erupted in applause. Even Lyra seemed impressed. "Few have deciphered the wisdom of our ancestors," she admitted. "You are more than just a warrior." James felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he could win over the tribe not just with physical prowess but with intelligence and diplomacy. Yet, as the third and final trial was announced, he realized it wouldn't be so simple. The last challenge was a duel against Lyra herself. The matriarch stepped into the arena, shedding her ceremonial armor to reveal a lithe but muscular frame. She carried a staff similar to James' multi-tool, though hers crackled with raw energy. "This is the trial's ultimate test," she declared. "Prove your worth by facing me, the chosen leader of this Kareth." James took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't match her strength directly. Her species' physiology was far superior to his. But battles weren't always won through brute force. Strategy would be his key. The duel began with a flurry of movement. Lyra attacked relentlessly, her strikes precise and powerful. James dodged and parried as best he could, using the staff he'd been provided. Each clash of their weapons sent sparks flying, the energy crackling through the air. As the fight wore on, James began to notice patterns in her movements. Lyra favored aggressive, high-energy attacks but left herself open after overextending. He decided to exploit this. During one of her lunges, he sidestepped and used her momentum against her, sweeping her legs out from under her. Lyra hit the ground with a grunt but recovered quickly, her eyes blazing with determination. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, their cheers blending into a deafening roar. James knew he couldn't sustain this fight for long. He needed to end it. Feigning exhaustion, James staggered back, luring Lyra into a final charge. As she rushed forward, he dropped to the ground and rolled behind her, hooking his staff around her weapon and disarming her in a fluid motion. Before she could react, he pressed the end of his staff to her throat, signaling his victory. The arena fell silent for a moment before erupting into cheers and chants. Lyra rose slowly, her expression unreadable. For a tense moment, James wondered if she would declare the duel invalid or demand a rematch. Instead, she extended her hand. "You have proven yourself," she said, her tone laced with grudging respect. "The long staff truly belongs in your hands." James accepted her hand, though his grip was firm. "I'm not your fertility bearer," he said, meeting her gaze. "But I will help your people find a real solution, one that doesn't involve forcing anyone into something against their will." Lyra's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "You have earned the right to speak. But not all will agree with you. Karath and her faction will not accept anything but tradition." James glanced toward the crowd, noticing a group of warriors who seemed less enthusiastic about his victory. One of them, a fierce-looking woman with a scar running down her cheek, met his gaze with open hostility. It didn't take a diplomat to recognize the seeds of conflict. As the tribe began to disperse, James couldn't shake the feeling that his trials were far from over. The Kareth had accepted his worth, but their internal divisions threatened to undo any progress he had made. And then there was the mystery of their infertility, a problem that seemed far more complex than ancient prophecies and ceremonial rites. For now, though, he had bought himself time. Time to learn, to plan, and to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or physical might but in its ability to adapt and find solutions against all odds. The trial of proving was over, but the real challenge had just begun. James sat cross-legged in the corner of the Kareth encampment, studying the holographic star map projected from his wrist communicator. The device displayed a patchwork of constellations, overlaid with encrypted data points he'd managed to extract from the ancient monolith. The puzzle he had solved in the trial of proving was more than just a test. It was a breadcrumb trail, a set of coordinates leading to a hidden facility that might hold the key to the Zcaratha's survival. He just had to convince them to follow it. The challenge wasn't just the distance to the facility, it was the divide within the tribe. Though Vialyra had publicly acknowledged his victory, it was clear her leadership was tenuous. Karath, the scarred warrior who led the opposing faction, had not accepted his triumph. Her disdain for James and her unwavering belief in tradition were palpable. If she decided to act, his fragile alliance with the Zcarath could unravel in an instant. As James pondered his next move, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You are studying the map again, aren't you?" James turned to see Saria, Vialyra's daughter, approaching. Unlike her mother, whose every movement carried the weight of command, Saria exuded a quiet curiosity. Her violet eyes shimmered in the dim light, reflecting a mixture of determination and hesitation. "I can't afford not to," James replied, gesturing to the hologram. "This facility, whatever it is, might hold the solution to your people's infertility. But I can't get there alone." Saria hesitated before sitting beside him. "You believe the Kale tracks left something behind that can save us?" James nodded. "I've seen it before. Ancient alien civilizations always leave breadcrumbs. The question is whether what they left behind is a cure or another curse." Saria frowned. "My people do not trust easily, especially after what the Kale tracks did to us. But I believe you, James. You have shown us courage, intelligence, and compassion, qualities we rarely see in outsiders." Her words carried an unexpected warmth, and James felt a flicker of hope. "If we can reach the facility, I'll need help navigating and dealing with whatever defenses might still be active. Can I count on you?" Saria's hesitation melted into resolve. "I will help you. And I will convince others to join us." By dawn, Saria had assembled a small team of younger warriors and scholars who shared her belief in James' mission. They were the tribe's innovators and dreamers, those willing to challenge tradition in the hope of a better future. The group's enthusiasm was infectious, though James couldn't ignore the tension it created within the camp. Karath and her followers watched their preparations with narrowed eyes, their murmurs growing louder as the team gathered supplies. Vialyra approached James as he prepared to leave. Her expression was stoic, but there was a hint of vulnerability in her tone. "You are taking my daughter into great danger. If anything happens to her, she'll be safe," James assured her. "I'll make sure of it." Vialyra studied him for a long moment before placing a hand on his shoulder. "May the ancestors guide you. And may you return with the answers we seek." With that, the team departed, their path illuminated by the pale glow of the twin suns. The journey to the coordinates was arduous, taking them through dense jungles, treacherous swamps, and rugged mountains. Along the way, James learned more about the Zcaratha's history, how the Kale tracks had bioengineered them for war, only to abandon them when the experiment proved unsustainable. The genetic tampering had left deep scars, both physical and cultural, and the tribe's obsession with fertility rituals was as much about survival as reclaiming their identity. As they neared the coordinates, the terrain grew more desolate. The lush vegetation gave way to jagged rocks and barren wastelands, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. It was here, in the shadow of a massive cliff face, that they found the entrance, a metallic doorway embedded in the rock, its surface etched with glowing symbols. James approached cautiously, his multi-tool in hand. "This is it," he said, more to himself than the others. "Let's hope the Kale tracks weren't the paranoid type." Using his multi-tool, he interfaced with the control panel beside the door. The ancient system resisted at first, but James coaxed it into life with a series of overrides. The door slid open with a groan, revealing a dark corridor that stretched into the depths of the cliff. The team entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast, silent space. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, illuminated by dim, flickering lights. The walls were lined with alien machinery, its purpose indecipherable at first glance. As they ventured deeper, they encountered the facility's defenses, automated drones that hovered silently until they detected intruders. The first wave caught them by surprise, their energy blasts scattering the team. James shouted for cover, using his multi-tool to disable one drone while Saria and the others fought off the rest with energy spears. Despite the danger, the team pressed on, their determination outweighing their fear. James led the way, his military instincts guiding him through the maze of traps and obstacles. At last, they reached the central chamber, a vast, dome-like structure filled with towering machinery. At the center was a console surrounded by glowing tubes that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. "This is it," James said, stepping forward. "The core of the facility." Saria joined him, her eyes wide with wonder. "Can it fix us?" James examined the console, deciphering its alien interface. "It's a genetic modification system. If I can access the database, I might be able to reverse the damage done to your DNA. But I'll need time." As he worked, the facility suddenly came to life. Alarms blared, and a holographic projection appeared, a Kaletrax overlord, its translucent form radiating an air of cold arrogance. "Unauthorized access detected," the hologram intoned. "Genetic experimentation is prohibited. Initiating self-destruct sequence." James cursed under his breath as the countdown appeared on the console. "Of course, it can't be easy." Before he could act, Karath and her followers stormed into the chamber. "I knew you would lead us to ruin," she shouted, her energy spear raised. "This facility is a blight on our ancestors' memory. We must destroy it." Saria stepped forward, her voice firm. "No, Karath. This is our chance to reclaim our future. If we destroy it, we lose everything." The tension between the factions was palpable, but James had no time for their infighting. "Enough!" he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. "If we don't stop the self-destruct, there won't be a tribe left to argue about. Now help me, or get out of the way." Karath hesitated, her followers looking to her for guidance. Finally, she lowered her spear. "Do what you must, human. But if you fail, it will be on your head." James worked furiously, navigating the alien system to override the self-destruct while Saria and the others defended the chamber from a new wave of drones. Sweat dripped down his brow as he bypassed layer after layer of security, the countdown ticking closer to 0. At the last moment, he found the override. The alarms silenced, and the glowing tubes pulsed brighter, indicating the system was operational. James slumped against the console, his chest heaving with relief. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. Saria placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression one of gratitude and awe. "You did it, James. You gave us hope." But James knew their journey wasn't over. The facility held answers, but it also posed questions about the Kaletrax, their experiments, and the legacy they had left behind. And as they prepared to return to the tribe, he couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges were still to come. The return journey to the Zkarath encampment was eerily quiet, the weight of what they had discovered in the Kaletrax facility hanging heavily over the group. Saria walked beside James, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. Behind them, the rest of the team carried data cores and alien artifacts recovered from the facility, relics that might hold the key to the tribe's salvation, or their undoing. As they approached the encampment, the first rays of the twin suns illuminated the gathering crowd. Vielira stood at the forefront, her expression unreadable as her eyes darted between her daughter and James. Karath and her faction lingered at the edges, their distrust evident in their wary postures. "What have you found?" Vielira demanded, her voice calm but commanding. James stepped forward, the recovered data core in his hands. "We found a genetic modification system left behind by the Kaletrax. It can reverse the damage they did to your DNA, but it's not a simple fix. The technology is ancient, and activating it will require careful calibration. There's a risk." "A risk?" Karath stepped forward, her voice dripping with disdain. "This human has already led us into danger once. And now he asks us to trust him again, with the very essence of our people? James held her gaze unflinching. Yes, it's a risk. But so is doing nothing. Your people are dying, Karath. If you want a future, this is your best chance. The murmurs of the gathered tribe grew louder, a chorus of uncertainty and debate. The Elira raised her hand, silencing the crowd. James Carter has proven his worth through the trial of proving. He has earned the right to make this decision with us. But it is not a decision to be made lightly. She turned to the crowd, her voice rising with conviction. Our ancestors fought for survival, not through fear, but through courage. If we are to honor their legacy, we must be willing to embrace change. Karatha's lips tightened, but she said nothing. James could see the internal battle in her eyes, a clash between her loyalty to tradition and the undeniable truth of their predicament. Finally, she stepped back, though the tension in her posture remained. Over the next several days, James and his Kareth worked tirelessly to prepare the genetic restoration process. The facility's technology was both advanced and fragile, its systems requiring constant adjustment to avoid catastrophic failure. James leaned heavily on Saria's knowledge of her people's biology, and the younger warrior's adaptability in operating the alien machinery. As they worked, James began to see the Kareth in a new light. Beneath their imposing exterior was a deep sense of community and resilience. They had endured centuries of hardship, their traditions born from a desperate fight for survival. Yet, despite their struggles, they had retained a spark of hope, a belief that their future could be brighter than their past. It was this hope that drove James to push himself beyond his limits. Days blurred into nights as he pored over the facility's systems, deciphering the Kaletrax's cryptic instructions and adapting them to the Kareth's unique physiology. Saria was a constant presence at his side, her quiet determination inspiring the rest of the team. You've done more for us than anyone could have asked, she said one evening as they worked late into the night. James glanced at her, exhaustion etched into his features. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Saria. If I can help your people find a future, maybe I can start making up for some of them. Saria smiled, a rare softness in her expression. You've already proven your worth, James. To my people, and to me. The day of the genetic restoration arrived with a sense of anticipation and trepidation. The entire tribe gathered outside the facility, their collective gaze fixed on the towering structure. Inside, James and the team made final adjustments to the system, their movements precise and deliberate. This is it, James said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Once we activate the system, there's no turning back. The Elira placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression solemn. Whatever happens, you have given us hope, James Carter. For that, we are forever in your debt. James nodded and turned to the console. With a deep breath, he initiated the sequence. The facility hummed to life, its machinery emitting a low, rhythmic pulse that resonated through the walls. The glowing tubes at the center of the chamber filled with a brilliant light, their energy radiating outward in a wave that enveloped the entire tribe. For a moment, there was silence. Then the air was filled with the sound of cheers and gasps as the Kareth realized what had happened. The restoration process had worked. The genetic damage inflicted by the Kaletrax had been repaired, their infertility reversed. James stepped back, a wave of relief washing over him. He turned to Saria, who was watching the celebration with tears in her eyes. We did it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked at him, her expression radiant. No, James. You did it. The celebration lasted well into the night, the tribe's joy spilling over into song and dance. James found himself at the center of the festivities, the reluctant hero whose actions had given them a second chance. Even Karath approached him, her demeanor softened by the overwhelming gratitude of her people. You are not what I expected, human, she admitted. But you have proven your worth. For that, you have my respect. James nodded, accepting the gesture with quiet humility. I didn't do this alone. Your people deserve the credit for their resilience and courage. As the night wore on, James found himself standing at the edge of the encampment, gazing up at the stars. Saria joined him, her presence a comforting warmth in the cool night air. "You'll leave soon, won't you?" she asked, her voice tinged with sadness. James sighed, his gaze never leaving the sky. "I don't belong here, Saria. This is your world, your people. I was just passing through." She was silent for a moment before placing a hand on his arm. "You may not belong here, James, but you will always be part of our story." James turned to her, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "And you'll always be part of mine." As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, James prepared to depart. The Scarith gathered to see him off, their expressions a mix of gratitude and sorrow. The Elira stepped forward, presenting him with a small, intricately carved token, a symbol of their tribe's highest honor. "This is a gift from the Scarith," she said. "A reminder that you are always welcome among us." James accepted the token, his chest tight with emotion. "Thank you for everything." As he boarded his repaired escape pod, Saria approached one last time. "Goodbye, James. May your path always lead to hope." James smiled, his hand lingering on hers for a moment before he stepped inside. As the pod lifted into the sky, he watched the Scarith grow smaller below, their figures blending into the vibrant landscape of their world. He didn't know what awaited him beyond this planet, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose. The Scarith had taught him that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope and resilience could prevail. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a place in the galaxy for a jaded diplomat with a knack for survival and a heart that wasn't as hardened as he had once believed.